morning. This is Nomberg Law Live, as we do every Tuesday. I am very honored to have a new friend to me, Mr. Joel Feldman from Philadelphia, with us. We're going to be talking about the dangers of driving while distracted. Joel and his wife, Diane, have a very personal story to share. And Joel, thank you for giving us your time this morning. And I look very much forward to hearing your story and for you sharing what your knowledge and experience with us.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to connect with your listeners, Bernard. I really do.
Joel, if you would, for those folks who don't know who you are and what your story is about, if you would, just share with us how it is that we're now sitting here talking about ending distracted driving.
Well, in July of 2009, my 21-year-old daughter, Casey, was walking across the street in a crosswalk. It was a beautiful summer day, and a 58-year-old man was reaching for his GPS. He rolled through a stop sign. He hit Casey. He killed her, and he said he never saw her. And she had successfully crossed one lane of traffic and was pretty much through his lane of traffic when she was hit and killed. And the only explanation was he took his eyes off the road and was distracted. So that, and like you, I'm an attorney and I represent consumers, and I did for years, but I also drove distracted all the time. Having Casey killed by a distracted driver changed the way I look at distracted driving, and it changed the way I drive. Today, I say I'm a recovering distracted driver.
And I can only imagine what you've been through over the last 9+ years, but knowing what I know about the project that you guys have created, the End Distracted Driving Project, and the Memorial Foundation you created in your daughter's to honor her memory, have been quite remarkable. And Joel, if you would, please tell us a little bit about the End Distracted Driving Project that you've created.
Okay, so after Casey was killed, I was initially asked by local law enforcement where Casey was killed if I would speak in traffic safety talks, and I did so. And after a little while, I was thinking about it, and I was saying, so I tell the story about Casey, a wonderful young woman that the world is a much poorer place for not having. Certainly we are in our lives. And I just wondered, am I being effective? Am I actually changing people's attitudes and behaviors? Because I knew all the statistics about distracted driving. I see it in my practice, like you see it in your practice, but I still drove distracted. So I began a search to see, are there some studies, are there some programs that have been studied to see, are they effective? And that led me to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, actually in my backyard here. And to make a long story short, they worked with us in terms of some behavior change things, some science, some surveys, some feedback, to see if we could come up with a presentation that was likely to maximize the opportunities for behavior and attitude change. So I started doing the talk, and then, I realized that I can't possibly talk to all the kids around the country that need to be talked to, so I reached out to trial lawyers, and you and many other trial lawyers, responded and said, we'll volunteer our time, we'll go out, we'll talk to schools. So that was about 7 years ago we started, and we update the presentation each year. We do focus groups with teens. We have surveys. We have experts help us with it, attend presentations. The idea is we need to change the way all of us look at distracted driving in this country, and we need to have the best possible presentation, and we need to have the most committed people giving that presentation.
Well, Joel, personally speaking, you came down to Birmingham, Alabama, and spoke to our trial lawyers organization a few years ago. That's when I first heard your presentation and your story, and it affected me enough to get involved. And I've now, it's been my honor to present the program, the presentation to my children's school the last couple of years. And I thank you for putting that together, because I'm sure over the last 9+ years, hundreds of thousands of children of driving age or just reaching driving age have now heard the presentation. And for those of you listening and watching, I would highly encourage you to go to the End Distracted Driving website or Facebook page or my law firm's page. Find the presentations and show them to your children. Show them to anyone of driving age, because the presentations are quite powerful. Joel, the times when I've been in front of the whole school and giving the presentations, I don't see children looking at their phones. I don't see them talking. I see faces straight forward and paying attention to the real world consequences that are part of this presentation. So thank you for putting that together and continuing to be out there for people. I know that you speak all over the country. You're Kansas City yesterday. Who knows where you're going to be tomorrow? I saw your public schedule of all the talks that are coming up. So it appears that more and more communities and organizations are finding your presentation and implementing it. Can you tell us some of the impact that you've seen?
Well, actually, sometime in the next 2 weeks, the 400,000 students in the country will see one of our presentations.
Wow.
All for free. There's no cost to us. Well, as you know, Bernard, you volunteer. It's all volunteer. So that's particularly gratifying. I'm fortunate. Well, I'm not fortunate for why I got into doing this, of course, but I think in the aftermath of Casey's death, I'm very fortunate. I get to do talks at high schools and middle schools. We're now working on additions to curricula for elementary schools. We do college talks. I also talk at a lot of businesses around the country, talk to adults, because that's a large part of it, moms and dads needing to be better role models. But, you know, distracted driving, well, after Casey was killed, I put a Google alert on the phrase distracted driving. I would get about 1 or 2 per week. That same Google alert has not changed, but what has changed is I get about 25, 30 a day now. So people are much more aware of distracted driving. There was a study that came out last week, and they asked folks, what is the biggest traffic concern that you have? It wasn't traffic safety, traffic concern. Far and away, the biggest concern that we have in this country for traffic, anything related to traffic, is distracted driving. So it did involve safety, but they didn't preload the question that way. It was about 90% distracted driving. I think congestion came next, and then drunk driving and drugged driving were about 50% of their major concerns. So it's on everybody's mind. And as I say in my talks, you know, most of us, particularly the adults, because we have driving experience, we get away with it lots of times. It's not so the case for our children. Being the most inexperienced, they're also the most vulnerable. And today, if you go on the U.S. Department of Transportation website, they'll talk about perhaps 20% of the crashes involve distracted driving. But the studies show for our children, it's over 50% of their serious crashes now involve some type of distraction. You know, not that drunk driving doesn't still kill our kids, but not the way it used to. Today, they're more likely to be killed or seriously injured as a result of distracted driving than drunk driving. So I'm fortunate, as I said, to be a part of this. I love working with teens. I love working with middle school kids. I'm looking forward to working with elementary school kids and getting some of these messages out. And you know, I hope, you know, none of your viewers have lost a child. I suspect probably some have, and it's awful. You don't get over it. You know, each day I kind of think about it, that I'm alive and my child is dead, and it's not supposed to be that way. And you know, I'm the one, I planned for the future in case he's dead, but you know, you never come to grips with it. You never fully accept it. But I know that it seems like it's the right thing to do. Well, I look at pictures of Casey, you know, pictures when she was 18 and when she was 21 when she was killed, and I see her youthfulness, and I think about all the potential she had. Her entire future was in front of her, and I see that every time I go into an auditorium. I know you see it when you go to your kids' schools. You see all those kids' faces. They should have that future. They should have that future. And car crashes are the leading cause of death for our kids. So helping them get that future, keep that future, helping them be all that they can be, giving them the opportunities to enjoy life, giving the opportunities to face life's challenges. That, to me, lessens somewhat the terrible, awful tragedy of Casey's death. And I'm so very blessed and fortunate that I get to do that pretty much every day because my law firm is very supportive. I think I'm a good lawyer, and I think they think I'm a good lawyer, but they tend to say, just go out there and keep talking to kids. So it works out well for me.
Well, Joel, from little that we've had contact, but from what I've read about you and have learned about you, I know you're an outstanding lawyer, but even better than that, you have turned one of life's tragedies into one of promise, one of hope, one of teaching, and I know you don't look for congratulations or thanks, but on behalf of me and anyone else watching this, we certainly thank you for your efforts and Diane's efforts over the last almost 10 years now. Unfortunately, in our metro area, a high school student was also recently killed by a distracted driver, and it just reinforced again the need to continue spreading the word and having this presentation and emphasizing to children and as well as adults, anyone who drives or is in a car, of these dangers. I know that you've heard every excuse imaginable as to why someone might drive distracting, but frankly, there is no excuse. It can wait. I know that's one of the hashtags that I see quite often. I know, well, my perception is that you're quite optimistic with your message. And I'm hoping that in your presentations, you're seeing this connect with kids, with drivers, with attendees at your events that you hold when you're speaking. Can you kind of share with us some of your optimism and what you're seeing that looks like the message is getting across?
Sure. Why don't we start with parents? I'm sure there's parents watching or will watch this in the recorded version. When I go to a presentation, I'll just say, parents, raise your hands if you would do anything to keep your children safe. Of course, every hand is raised. Some parents will raise both their hands. And then I say, only keep your hands up if you haven't driven distracted with your kids in the car. All those hands come down. The parents look embarrassed and ashamed. So the idea is we talk a good game, and I'm not disputing that we all love our children. I drove distracted with my kids in the car too. But if you think about it, the most important people in the world to us, and we take chances driving with them. So in that moment, we frame the issue for the parents, and parents will always decide in favor of the safety of their children. Always. Always. So in that moment, I know that I've got them thinking about it, and oftentimes we'll have parents and teens together in an evening presentation at a school, and we would take out a family safe driving agreement and say, sit down, work it out. Parents will ask me, before they see a presentation, what's the most important thing I can do to keep my kids safe from distracted driving? And I look at them and I say, be the driver you want your kid to be. Don't just tell them not to drive distracted. And if you have driven distracted, I say, sit down with your kids. Tell them you were wrong to drive distracted. You want their help. And this goes for kids even as young as 7 or 8 years old. Ask them to keep an eye on mom and dad and don't let me drive distracted. They're going to be less likely to pick up the phone when they get older. That's what we need to do. But if you have teen drivers and you have this conversation, I warn the parents, make this conversation about you, your mistakes, your change in attitude, you're wanting to be safer, but stop before you then tell them, and I don't want you to drive distracted either. This is your conversation. This is your opportunity to fess up. They'll get it. You don't have to then lecture them. And I'm a great lecturer when it comes to my kids. And I'm trying to refrain from doing that. But that's what I tell people to do. So that gets me optimistic. Just as we were talking, I was in Kansas City yesterday at a boys' school, 1,100 boys, and just crowded into this gymnasium. But I'll tell you, when you talk to them, and initially, each and every one of my speakers has to get up and they have to talk about how they drove distracted. And I think it's a sign of you engender credibility for the speaker, but I also think it shows respect for the audience. Time after time, the feedback we get from students is, hey, well, I probably talk about me. That old guy came in here and he didn't say it was all our fault. He said he used to do it too. So we could listen to him because he's not lecturing us and saying it's all the kid's fault. I think that's a large part of it. And the studies show that. The 16 to 18-year-olds text maybe about a third of them text. You get to the 19 to 24-year-olds and the 25 to 39-year-olds, and it's over 50%. So teens are not the worst offenders. They are the most inexperienced, and it adversely, disproportionately affects them. And that's why this is so important to me, and I know to you, and to so many other people who want to do the right thing and keep our kids safe.
Joel, the statistics are they make you shake your head. The results, you never read about anything good in the news that's happened to a distracted driver. Every bit of it is always bad news. I want to reset for just a minute for those of you just joining us. Joel, we have numerous people from different parts of the country. I won't be able to mention them all, but I know that Diane is watching. Thank you, Diane. Nicole, Lindsay, Morris, Anne Marie. We've got several people watching right now. We've got a couple of questions that I can field to you. If someone wants to get involved to get the distracted driving presentation, what do they need to do? How do they find that information?
Sure, they can go to our website. It's END, and then two more Ds, dd.org. So enddd.org. And they could just send me an email. It's very simple, info@enddd.org. There's some folks who might want to think about maybe they want to become speakers. It's not just trialers for speakers. We have injury prevention coordinators, nurses, physicians, law students, medical students, business people, just people who are comfortable speaking in front of kids and want to take a presentation that's pretty much done and tested. So they can do that if they want to become a speaker, and if they want to host a presentation, in their community, at their school. We have speakers in Birmingham. We'd love for people to reach out and want you to come into their schools or their business meetings or community organizations and talk with them about it.
Absolutely. And for those of you who don't know, I've spoken at my children's school on the last couple of years, and I'll be glad to go anywhere in the state to speak on this presentation. Joel, you mentioned a few minutes ago about young children who may be in the car and they're monitoring their parents driving and to say something. Can you give us any more simple strategies for those who are either in the car as passengers or as drivers, what they should do to keep themselves safe?
Okay. So when we go into a presentation, I'll walk up to any kid or adult and I'll say, hey, the person sitting next to you, that's your friend, right? Yes. Here's the scene. If you saw them staggering out of a party or a bar, they were drunk, and they had their car keys in their hand, what would you do? Everybody says, I wouldn't let them drive. And I say, well, what would happen if they said, oh, I'm okay? They'd say, we don't let them drive. People don't generally do that with respect to getting into a car with someone that they know or suspect is going to use their phone. So friends don't let friends drive distracted. Friends don't let friends drive drunk. Everybody knows that. We're working on friends don't let friends drive distracted. So studies show that if you speak up in a non-confrontational fashion, a respectful fashion, particularly when you're talking to your mom and dad, you have to be respectful. If you speak up, the overwhelming majority of people will put their phones down. Recently, a study of AT&T, 85% of people who drive distracted, if they were asked by someone who was their close friend, family member, coworker, in a nice way, they put their phone down. So if you can get over the little bit of hesitancy some of us may have in correcting, scolding, talking to our driver, you're likely to be successful. So we have a bystander intervention. There are bystander interventions, as the name suggests, for lots of different things. for binge drinking on college campuses, drunk driving, bullying, and it was adapted by some researchers, and it's a three-step process. It goes kind of like this. In a non-confrontational fashion, acknowledge the behavior. Let's say, Bernard, you're driving me, you're Snapchatting away down the highway. I just want to say to you, Bernard, every time you look at your phone, you look away from the roadway. My intent here is not to get Bernard upset with me, and it's just to be non-confrontational. I could say that to Bernard, and he'd think about it. The most important step is tell the person that you care about and presumably cares about you how you feel. I'm not going to accuse Bernard. I'm not going to say, Bernard, you're scaring me. I'm going to use an I statement. I'm going to say, I feel nervous. Big difference between a you statement, blaming him for how I feel. If I blame Bernard for making me feel nervous, he's going to say, well, I'm not doing that. He's going to get defensive. If I say, I feel this, probably he's going to feel badly because I feel nervous with him driving me. And then the most important step really is solve the problem. Bernard, we've got plenty of time. Let's pull over to the side of the road, pull into a private parking lot where it's safe, and, take your time. We've got plenty of time. Let me hold the phone for you. So we do this in our presentations, and it's been very, very successful. We get great feedback on it. I get emails all the time from kids that say it works with mom and dad. It's worked with other friends. I've been very fortunate. I do a lot of talks down in the southern part of the country, and I know there are people all over the country looking at this, but probably presumably more in your area. And the people down south are very kind, respectful, courteous people. You guys are known for that down there. Now, I'm not saying the people up north aren't that way, but there's a little bit of a difference. So that's why it's kind of shocking to me when I'm in Atlanta, I'm in Nashville, I'm in Birmingham, I'm in Huntsville, and I see so many people driving distracted. Because if you think about it, isn't it disrespectful to be looking at our phones when we're driving down the road? Forget about it when we have passengers we love in the car, but all the strangers on the road. We would open the door for a stranger. We would say hello to a stranger. We treat a stranger with respect, but somehow we lose that when we get behind the wheel of a car. Kids are telling me they feel disrespected when someone else is Snapchatting or texting while driving. As a 63-year-old, I didn't really think about it that way, but listening to kids get it right often. So we now work that into our programs. Is it respectful to drive distracted? No. Is it selfish to drive distracted? Yeah, it's a little selfish to drive distracted. So we work on some of those messages as well. But our idea is the way we change the way people think about distracted driving in this country is we change culture. We change, just like we've done for drunk driving, we stigmatize it. We want people to think about their driving behaviors, make changes if they need to, think about others, that respect for other people, and all of us are passengers. So our driving attitudes and behaviors, but speaking up when we need to speak up and let people know we care about, we want them to drive safely. So it's the driving and the speaking up is the integral parts of our program.
Well, Joel, down in the South, we love our cars, and that's how we get from place to place. And as such, it's not just being on the phone. It's eating. It's reading. It could be anything that takes your eyes off the road. And I know that giving those presentations, some of those presentations are a little bit on the funny side to get the kids' attention, but it shows kids or drivers trying to eat or trying to read a book or play a video game. It could be anything that just takes your eyes off the road. And I know that largely when we talk about distracted driving, it's about having your phone and doing something on the phone. But do the statistics and the people you've dealt with or interviewed, is there a higher percentage of the people who drive distracted? Is it the phone or is it other things that distract them?
Well, that's a really good question. It's a really good point to make. For the teens, as we said, about half of the serious crashes are caused by distraction, a little more than half, and of that, about half of those, so roughly a quarter, animated conversations with passengers, and the other quarter or more with respect to phone use. Reaching for objects in the car is notoriously dangerous. And I guess the point I make is the man who killed my daughter, he wasn't on his phone. He was reaching for something. So Casey is just as dead as if that man had been texting or Snapchatting. So it doesn't really much matter. There are lots of moms and dads who are mourning children, and the people who killed their children weren't texting. They were doing other things in the car. We drop a cell phone. There's a number of people who've been killed across the country because drivers dropped cell phones and were leaning down, reaching for them, and crossed over the center line. So it's lots of different things. And again, as one middle school kid said to me recently, "Hey, Mr. Feldman, this isn't rocket science. When you're driving, you really ought to be looking at the road, because when I'm riding my bicycle, I wouldn't do any of that stuff. I look at the road. I look at the sidewalk. I look to see what's going on." And that brings up another point. It's okay if I do it, but I don't want the person in the car next to me to do it. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of this, do as I say, not as I do. And for many of the people who are listening, with driver's ed, we were taught to be defensive drivers. What does it mean to be a defensive driver? Expect the unexpected. Expect that car that should be stopping at the stop sign or the stoplight isn't going to stop, maybe because their driver's on the phone. You have to leave yourself an out. You have to pay attention. I'm telling you, today, with all the distracted driving, there's more of a need to be a defensive driver than any time in my life. Anytime. You need to scan the road. You need to predict where these dangers are going to come from. You need to identify all those actual risks, and you need to make decisions about what you're going to do. If you're looking down at your phone, you can't be that defensive driver. Don't you owe it to yourself, also the people you love and care about in your car, to be a defensive driver and protect them? Distracted drivers can't be defensive drivers.
Joel, very, very well said. Thank you for sharing that information and your knowledge with us. Again, we're talking with Joel Feldman. Today we're talking about the dangers of driving while distracted, and we're coming to a close, and I thank you for your time. Joel, I did notice this past week on social media, beautiful tributes to Casey. What was the significance of this past week, if you could share that?
Yes, April 6th, last Friday, was Casey's 30th birthday. And so we had, I guess you would call it, a virtual birthday party. We had lots of folks around the country who knew Casey, but many more who did not, talking about how their lives have changed for the better because of Casey, learning her story, learning about her life and her death. Not exclusively her death. Lots of feedback from people who, many of the people who do our talks will freely admit that they drove distracted, and now they're doing a lot better. I will actually get emails from spouses of some of our speakers say, "Thank God that, my spouse is now doing those talks, because they were the worst distracted driver. But since they're up there now talking in front of kids, I think they feel that they can't be that distracted driver anymore." So so many different things. When you have a person who's a good-hearted person who cares about other people, they touch people in their life. They touch people when you hear about it. And, I know that, I tell Casey's story to keep other kids safe. I tell Casey's story to keep her memory alive. And I know that I kind of bridge sometimes the land of the dead, the land of the living, and telling people's stories. Casey taught others this as a reporter. Telling people's stories, those unique, beautiful stories, is a way to change lives. We need to listen to stories, and we can change lives and make a difference in the world for good. So, again, it was, it's bittersweet. We wish we had Casey here, but we're so thankful of the support of everyone around the country and everybody who's trying to do a little bit better in Casey's memory.
Well, Joel, on behalf of all those lives you've touched and continue to touch, that the foundation that Diane and you created and the work that y'all are doing daily and weekly and monthly. Thank you for the work that you put in, the message that you're sharing, and thank you for being with us for this past 30 minutes. I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you, Bernard, and I really appreciate the opportunity. And of course, it's great, speaking with you, and we appreciate your support in terms of our distracted driving program.
Well, certainly, we will continue to do our part as well. Thank you all for being with us today on Nomberg Law Live. We'll rebroadcast this over the upcoming weeks. You can always find it on our website, Facebook page, and YouTube channel. I'll put in the comments section in a few minutes how to reach Joel, how to reach the organization. Thank you guys for your time, and we'll see you. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll catch you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you.